All right, everybody. Happy Sunday, the 18th. I am one of your hosts for Black Civics Collective, for the Black Civics Collective. And I just want to say happy Sunday, everyone. LA is on a emergency weather watch. So we're going to cross our fingers and hope my internet stays live. In the meantime, in between time, we are still in Black History Month. So happy Black History Month, everybody. I want to go ahead and get us started by introducing us to my fellow co-hosts. We have the one and only McAdoo, Mahmoud Shabazz. He is NAASD's communications chair. Say what's up to the people, Mahmoud.
How's it going, everybody? I hope you guys are having a wonderful evening or afternoon in California. Let's get going. I'm excited.
Okay. And we also have with us Gerard Amir Shakir, NAASD's political organizing host. And so we want to thank everyone for tuning in today, whether you are on Facebook or Twitter or what's the other one?
YouTube,
YouTube. We're
the
glad
big
that
one.
you're here. Gerard, say what's up to the people.
Yep, coming in here from snowy Cleveland, Ohio. Happy to be here. Definitely the political organizing chair. And yep, happy to be here with my co-host.
All right. Well, let's get to it. Why don't you tell everybody, Mahmoud, why we do this thing called Black Civics?
Right. So we have to understand what civics is to begin with, right? So civics is all the aspects that goes into being a citizen of a society. It's all the rights that you are owed, all the responsibilities that you are taxed with. And civic engagement is the collective efforts that addresses the concerns and provides solutions for different communities within that society. So whether that be driving out to vote for an important election cycle, or whether that be taking your local politicians to task about why there's not enough fresh produce in my neighborhood, or why the water isn't clean in my neighborhood, right? So when we talk about Black civics, we're addressing the needs and concerns of American freedmen, the men, women, and children who descend from people who were enslaved in this country, people who were subjected to black codes, Jim Crow laws, peonage, redlining, 400 years of disenfranchisement and terrorism. Uh, Black civics is here to remind you that those unique circumstances require unique policies to rectify those harms. And that's why we're here.
All righty. Thank you so much for that. And
Well
remember,
said.
you can write a special ed, an op ed for your local newspaper. You can join a civics organization like the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants. Obviously, we are in the voting election cycle, and so you can actively exercise your right to vote. Those are some things that you can do to stay civically engaged all the time. With that being said, we have our first guest, Senator Stephen Bradford. And so, Gerard, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Friday. And it's a great privilege for me to introduce California Senator Stephen Bradford. Senator Stephen Bradford has been an advocate for reparations and social justice. So let me tell you more about his work. Because we're thrilled to have California Senator Stephen Bradford representing California's 35th congressional district, with just over 2 decades of dedicated public service. Senator Bradford brings a wealth of experience to the California State Senate, from his pioneering role as the first African American elected to the Gardena City Council, to his impactful leadership in the State Assembly and now in the Senate. Bradford has been a tireless advocate for his community. Not just a politician, but a true public servant. He spearheaded initiatives to address economic growth, public safety, and social equity. His legislative achievements, from championing bills on cannabis equity to enhancing law enforcement transparency, showcase his commitment to progress and justice. Beyond the political arena, Senator Bradford is deeply engaged for his community, from starting a junior golf club program to funding the renowned Gardena Jazz Festival. Join us as we delve into the journey and his vision for the future, and the vital issues shaping California today. Please let's welcome California Senator Senator Bradford.
Welcome.
Thank you for joining us,
You
sir.
are muted, Senator.
Thank you, Gerard, for that introduction, and appreciate the invitation to join you in the discussion today. So happy Black History Month.
We are glad to have you. And so I haven't seen you since that genealogy event down at the Beehive. We talked a little bit about your SB 490, which was one of the first reparations bills to actually the text to be published in California. And we all know the saying, as California goes, so does the nation. So tell us a little bit about that particular bill, since it came out first in the reparations package from the Congressional Legislative Black Caucus.
California Legislative
Black Caucus.
I don't need our friends in Washington, D.C. to get upset.
We could send you some of the time, but anyway, go ahead, sir.
I appreciate it. But you're speaking of SB 490. It's truly just a framework, and regardless of what reparations looks like, whether it's land, education, ongoing health care, or even a check, you have to have some kind of oversight, some kind of governmental entity. As we know, in 1865, there was a Freedmen's Bureau. So whether we call it that, the American Freedmen's Bureau, or whether we just call it Reparations Agency, this bill stands up the framework, the foundation, and will be responsible for the implementation and disbursement of whatever those recommendations are, and it also will help with those individuals who are concerned about identifying their eligibility, helping them with their genealogy as well. So that's our hope with this agency, similar to the California Tribal Affairs Bureau that we set up to help with our Native Americans understanding their legacy, as well as the obligations that the state owes to them for all the horrific experiences they went through here in California. So we want to have a similar agency such as this.
Right, and Senator Bradford, I want to ask you about the excuse me, the CLBC's criminal justice reform proposals within the 2024 reparations legislative package. As you well know, the black population in California is only 6.5%, but Black people are well overrepresented in the incarcerated population. 2015 report showed that 20% of Californian jails were populated by Black people, and 28% of California prisons were populated by Black people. And California also imposes the detrimental 3 strikes rule as well. So what are some of the proposals that the CLBC put forth to address those issues related to criminal justice reform?
I can't speak to all the bills directly related to that. We introduced 14 that were considered priorities as it related to reparations. So of those 14, I don't know specifically what speaks to that, but that has been at the forefront of the discussion, regardless whether it's part of the reparations package or just their overall bill package. I mean, solitary confinement is one of those things. The Mandela Act that is part of that. Restoring voting rights to individuals who are currently incarcerated was part of our colleagues' packages. Also improving the materials, reading materials and books inside prisons as well. But also, really looking at the over-incarceration. I mean, it's a direct result of slavery. It's a direct result of Jim Crow. It's a direct result of, all those things that were the vestiges of slavery. So it's all encompassed in what we do on a daily basis, whether it was reparations or not. I mean, criminal justice reform is always at the forefront because, as you stated, we're always at the top of the ladder when it comes to these harsh charges and convictions and sentencing versus, our counterparts in society. So we're always going to be at the, on the front line of trying to make sure we make corrections there in that space.
Thank you for that.
And Senator Bradford, I actually want to go back to SB 490 because you actually maintain the integrity of the task force by retaining language, special consideration for African Americans who descend from persons enslaved in the United States. Like that language is actually in the bill that you wrote. And I'm just curious, how has that choice in terms of your language in the bill been received by the legislature? And have you heard anything from the public on 490? Because coming out the gate, to maintain that integrity, I think is important. And I'm just curious to know how it has been received.
Well, I question whether anyone really knows what's in any of those bills outside the Black Caucus. That's where the majority of the discussion has been had so far. The bill deadline was this past Friday, so I'm hoping our colleagues, our non-Black Caucus colleagues, will soon delve into what our bill package consists of, even beyond the 14 bills, because again, I have additional reparations bills. My colleagues have additional reparations bills. But I think we start with how many have even looked at the executive summary from the task force from last June, let alone the entire report. So I think that's the real question to have. How many have seen that? And I venture to say very little have looked at that, let alone the bills that we have put forth.
So is that standard or typical? I mean, in terms of the legislature, how does the legislature get familiar with bills from other members, of in your case, the Senate?
Once they start making their way through committee hearings, not a single bill has had a hearing so far. So, I mean, members were concerned about their own package up until, again, Friday was the deadline. So, I mean, has there been sidebars on what we're going to do and, one-on-ones? But when you talk about, people really doing a deep dive and looking at these bills, whether it's reparations, criminal justice reform, wherever it is, I guarantee the majority of folks have not done that because, again, the last 6 weeks, 2 months have been a focus on what individual bill packages looking like, getting their bills in by the deadline. So now it's the opportunity, once they start making their way through the respective houses, will individuals have it brought before them before they go to their respective committees and do their homework on it.
So what I hear you saying as an advocate is now is the time, now that everyone's got their respective bills in, now is the time to start hearing from community, from people.
Without a doubt. Well, one of the reasons why I had a bill to extend the task force last year, which then morphed itself into 490, the language that we are dealing with today as far as the Freedmen's Bureau, is because we had done our work. Come June 29th, the report spoke for itself. But now the real challenge, as we've seen in the last 7 months since the report has come across and been delivered, of educating the public. And that's what the challenge is right now, not only for the Black Caucus, not only for the California State Legislature, but for California as a whole to understand, because many folks are unaware. They don't understand the history, not just of slavery, but American history. And this report, this 1,100 pages, speaks to all the trauma, all the harm, all the vestiges that are still existing today. Why laws are crafted the way they are in California is mainly because of us, slavery and then the emancipation of folks. So it's work to be done to educate not only my colleagues in the legislature, but the masses as a whole. So yes, we need the voices of the activists. We need the voices of the legislature. We need the voices even of the naysayers, because we need them to be educated. We need them to know what's in those packages. So this is the real fight. And that's the real challenge I want people to understand. This won't be a one and done process. This will take several legislative sessions, several years to even start putting real meat on the bones and, making amends and starting to stand up many of these programs. Again, you have 115 recommendations. You surely won't have 115 pieces of legislation addressing each piece of each one of those recommendations in this legislative cycle, let alone, the ones that come.
Is one of the ways, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask, is one of the ways of educating the populace combating sort of like the negative media perception of reparations?
You sure what?
Is one of the ways of educating the populace combating the negative media perception of reparations? You know, media saying this handouts,
It's not.
uh,
It again.
you have to pay for it, stuff like that.
It's about them knowing American history. As we often say, there's stories that made America, and then there's stories that America has made up. Much of what we teach in school are the stories that America have made up. And that's why you have so many states now wanting to ban books that clearly spell out the real history of this country. As W.E.B. Du Bois often said, would America be America if it were not for the Negro? And this 1,100-page document speaks to what we've done in this country beyond just picking cotton. It speaks to our inventions that we were never able or granted a patent on, all the medical advances we pioneered in this country that we never get credit from, many of the inventions that we were never credited for because we weren't able to, again, to take out a patent and be fully compensated or even recognized for that work. So it's about education, and we've done a great job in this country of miseducating not only the Negro but the masses as a whole.
Yes, thank you, and I appreciate that, Senator Bradford. And that, the book banning and all that—that's not a new practice. That's an old practice. The Daughters of the Confederacy, they often, went to different libraries, threw away, burned books, wrote unfair to the South on those books. So this is the old practices that we see nowadays. But I want to ask you more about what we can do as far as make sure some of these legislative bills have more teeth. Why doesn't someone submit a cash payment legislation piece? And I also want to know, basically, the bill has a lot of teeth, including oversight of state agencies, including specific offices like medical services and legal affairs. The director would also report directly to the governor. Now, California recently appointed a surgeon general. How do you see the agency interfacing with existing agencies?
Again, we don't want duplication. We want coordination. So we wanted to work in concert with those agencies that are already stood up, whether it's the health department, whether it's Department of Education and Housing. We want them to be an ally. We want them to be a resource as we stand these programs up. And, as it relates to cash payment, again, this is just the first series of bills. You eat the elephant one bite at a time. So, so to expect everything at once, as we say, if you load up the Christmas tree, what does it do? It collapses. So you got to take bits and pieces. I'm not here to criticize what should have been first, but this was a democratic process amongst the Black Caucus of voting on what they wanted the priorities to be. And that's where we find ourselves. I mean, not to say that there won't be forthcoming bills talking about cash payments and various other ways of compensating individuals who are descendants of chattel slavery here in the United States.
So, Senator Bradford, just to piggyback a little bit off of the cash question, we know, and this came up during the actual AB 3121 hearings, that California had already projected that there was going to be a budget shortfall, particularly because we're still feeling the fiscal trickle, if you will, of COVID and some of the aftermath of that. But with the projection of cash, we did see San Francisco, which in my opinion came out way ahead of the state task force with their $5 million, benchmark. And then their mayor basically, that commission hadn't even finished its work. And the mayor basically said, hey, due to fiscal shortfalls, we're scrapping reparations, period. Because this was brought up during the hearings, what do you think should be done with or without, a fiscal shortfall?
I mean, it's about priorities. And again, I can't set a dollar amount on what the state should set aside for reparations, but if it's going to be real, there has to be a fiscal obligation of cash funding for the program, whether it's funding for education, whether it's funding for housing, whatever the case may be, you have to put that in your budget. So at some point, you have to bite the bullet and say, this is a priority. We often say our budget is a reflection of our values, is a reflection of our priorities. So if reparations is not in the budget, then really this is all just talk. So we have to assign some form of dollar amount. I've said since day one, we passed a $300 billion budget. Even if we get 0.5% set aside for reparations on an annual basis and a going forth basis, that's 1.
I remember you saying 1%. I'm gonna go with you on that 1%.
I said 0.5%, but that's $1.5 billion. Even if you look at our reserve of almost over $30 billion and you equate that to 6% of the population, that's still about, a nice piece of change that is going to be set aside, close to $1 billion that you can still set aside for reparations. So we continue. I just was watching this news story the other day about the high-speed rail. When voters voted to pass high-speed rail in 2008, the projected budget and cost of high-speed rail was $30 billion. Today, here we are, 16 years after the fact, and it's well beyond $150 billion. And nobody continues to ask, where do we get the money to pay for this? So it's about making this a priority. If reparations is a priority, we should be able to find the money. And again, whether it's putting a percentage of our reserve aside to stand this program up or a percentage of our overall budget, we have to show that we're serious about it. So it has to be in the budget.
I can definitely appreciate that. And thank you for restating it. I do remember you actually saying that during the hearings, and I thought it was important to say it in advance of this particular time, say it in advance of the report, because oftentimes when it comes to reparations, especially in these United States of America that are, to your point, ignorant about America's own history, we constantly in the reparation space will hear, well, you got it through a social program, or you got it through the welfare program, or you got it, through the folks who died in the Civil War. Like there's this sort of weird thing that happens as if we are not citizens, as if we don't pay taxes. I like to say I donate a small card to the United States government every year, and I want to see my tax dollars at work beyond when I check in to TSA at the airport. I want to see it show up in my everyday life. And so I think it's important for people to hear that message from you, particularly as the vice chair of California's Legislative Black Caucus. I got it right that time. With regards to some of the things we saw in the news media, and some of the bills still don't have full bill numbers, so we can't totally dive into the text, but I do know there was something about financial aid for redline communities in the news. And, Black folks have moved all from here, there, and everywhere in California. How does that affect people who are either no longer living in redline communities or who have maybe left the state altogether? Do you have any idea what qualifiers potentially could be? Has that conversation started with California's Legislative Black Caucus?
No, it hasn't. I mean, it hasn't started with the legislature as a whole. So not until those bills, again, the bill dealing with redlining and tax relief, that's my bill. And not until the bill starts moving, we have those discussions and we start putting meat on the bone. I mean, that's what amendments are about. That's what compromise is all about. So those questions will be discussed. Yes, I mean, it's a whole lot of moving parts on even people who not only didn't own property, but who lived in California at some point and moved out, or people who have moved in since the end of slavery. And we're working on, again, who qualifies again. And if you can show your lineage, to chattel slavery here in this country, or if you arrived as the qualification stated, communities of eligibility, that you arrived here in the early 1900s, then and you can prove that, then you qualify. You qualify for that.
I like that. That's like, keep it simple. The simpler you keep it, the less, folks have to struggle with meeting certain compliance benchmarks. And with that, I know how to reach you on social media, but what are like your final thoughts? What do you want our listeners and our viewers? I think our first show was last month. We had over 1,000 hits on the 3 different platforms that we stream from. So what do you want our viewers to take away from this process, take away from SB 490? How do you want our viewership to engage with what California is doing?
By letting your voice be heard, not just to me, not just to the Black Caucus, but to those other members of the legislature. Regardless, you're going to need 41 votes to get off the assembly floor. You're going to need 21 votes to get off the Senate floor. Understanding there's only 12 African-American members of the legislature. 12. We're 10%. So that means another 128 you have to talk to, or some portion thereof you have to talk to, because again, it's only 2 Black senators. So in order to get to 21, you got to talk to 19 folks other than myself and Senator Smallwood, and there are 10 assembly people. So you need to find another 31 people that you got to convince. Reparations is important because the Black Caucus already knows it's important. Now it's a question of, again, getting our allies, our so-called allies, because this will be a real profile and courage for a lot of folks. This will allow them to really show where they are with standing up with us, because a lot of folks always say, I'm with you, and then when it comes to, putting action behind words, they find a way to disappear. I remember in 2020, shortly after the death of George Floyd, we assembled on the west steps of the Capitol, and we had close to 80-something people who took a knee for 9 minutes with their fists in the air in support of George Floyd. But that same year that I had police decertification bill, we couldn't get it off the assembly floor. And many of those folks who weren't willing to vote for it were some of those folks who took a knee on that west steps in solidarity. But when it came down to casting the vote, they were nowhere to be found. So it's going to be, we have to educate the public. We have to educate our own people, because it's some folks that look like us who think, reparations is a thing of the past. But let's be clear. It is what was promised. It's what was owed, and it's 160 years overdue. And again, America would not be America if it were not for the Negro. And our contributions are still felt today. So I would just ask for folks first to educate themselves, even if they do no more than read the executive summary of the Reparations Task Force, and encourage their friends, their neighbors, and their legislators, because again, all 12 of us don't represent every Black person or in the state. So making sure that your legislator has read this, and the people in their district has read it as well.
Thank you so much, Senator Bradford. And for those of you who want to follow the senator, you can follow him at SEN Bradford, BRADFORDCA on Twitter. I don't know if you have any other social media handles, but that's where I follow you. Do you have any other social media handles you want to give out?
I probably do, but I don't know. I'm sure.
Well, we got that one out to the people. Stay engaged with Senator Bradford's office. Again, he is the vice chair of California's Legislative Black Caucus. And until next time, you are a friend to reparations. You really stood in the gap when it came to that final swing vote, changing the trajectory of the work that was being done. The 1,100 pages are condensed in that executive summary. And we thank you so much for having time to be with us here today on Black Civics Collective.
Well, thank you for your voice. It's critically important. And I can't stress it enough. You're helping educate not only about reparations, but who we are as a people and our contributions to this country and to the world. So, and so many of us that look like us still don't know that history. Really?
Thank you so much.
I learned so much on the Reparations Task Force. I mean, you think you know something, right, and then you find out you don't. So it's going to take a village, and you're part of it.
It's so much to learn, and we appreciate you. Thank you for being here. Absolutely. And giving us more of your knowledge.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you so much, Senator Bradford.
Keep the fight up.
Yeah.
All right, that was our first segment with Senator Bradford. We are going to take a quick commercial break and reset just a little bit. We do have a video from Spectrum, but we're actually going to save that when we hear from the advocates that we're going to have to talk about their response to these bills in a future show. But in the meantime, in between time, we do have our survey, the Black Experience Survey that the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants has put together. We encourage you all to take the survey. I am going to drop the link here, which our producing team can go ahead and share with you. But we're going to take a short break, and we will be right back. Stay tuned. All right. Once again, you can go to surveymonkey.com/r/NAASD2023 to find our Black Experience Survey. This survey was put together specifically to hear from our freedmen family. It was important that we do this kind of survey because a lot of the times the surveys are really crafted with either the Democratic platform or the GOP platform, and we are nonpartisan with our reparations efforts, and it was important to us to craft something that really spoke to the families that were here during slavery and the founding of the country in 1776. So again, you can go to www.surveymonkey.com/r/NAASD2023. We also have on screen 2 QR codes. The one on the left takes you to the Black Experience Survey. And if you want to learn more about the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants, you can use the QR code on the right. So we are here. We're ready for our next guest. So Mahmoud McAdoo, you got it.
All right, so we have a double header for you guys today. So I hope you guys are really enjoying it. Camila Moore is a reparatory justice scholar and attorney with specialization in entertainment and intellectual property laws. As a law student, Moore contributed to reports related to domestic and international human rights issues, including but not limited to racial inequality in Brazil, the human rights sanitation in Lowndes County, Alabama, the human right to remedy indigenous Black women affected by racialized gender violence in Papua New Guinea. While studying abroad at the University of Amsterdam, Moore wrote a master thesis exploring the intersections between international law and reparatory justice with the transatlantic slave trade, chattel slavery, and their legacies. From 2021 until its conclusion in 2023, More Trade California's AB 3121 Task Force, which studied and developed reparations proposals for the descendants of U.S. chattel slavery and free people of color living in the United States prior to 1900. Moore earned a Juris Doctor degree from Columbia Law School, a Master of Law degree in International Criminal Law from the University of Amsterdam, and a bachelor's degree from the University of California. Ms. Moore, it is an honor and a privilege to have you on our show today.
Woohoo!
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Glad you could be here. We know during the task force hearings, and we just had Senator Bradford here talking about SB 490, but you really were a champion to make sure that the descendants were not just marginalized with universal policy. You were really a stone cold advocate. Nobody saw the bat until she hit him with it, but you were a stone cold advocate for, you know, the descendants, whether it was for the folks who are descendants of enslaved persons like us, or persons who were here at the turn of the century and their descendants in California. And you really did advocate. And so we are so glad to have you here today. And of course, we're talking about the big news. California dropped their reparations package. I don't know how much of what you heard Bradford say, but he said that all of their summaries were due last week, Friday. But from what I saw, some of the legislation did not even have bill numbers assigned as of yet. And so because you are now you're done with the hard work, the heavy lifting, the report is out. It's 1,100 pages. Everyone knows that. We really wanted to hear from you some sort of comparison of what was released that we do have access to versus what was in the actual report. And so that's kind of where we want to take things today. And I dropped a link for people if they actually want to see the legislative package. They did do a press release January 31st, but I just want to dive in. But you guys can start with the questions.
Sure. So I think I heard a bit of what Bradford said, and to his point, the task force, we recommended over 100 recommendations, I think 114, 15 to be exact. And so I think all of the bills have been assigned numbers now. To your point, though, when we look at you know, the bills that were introduced, all of them do correspond to, you know, the components of our final report, either to the text, like to the actual studies, to the actual, you know, studies that we cited, or they actually directly correlate to actual recommendations that we provided. I think the major critique about the CLBC's package, it's two-pronged. One, it omits cash payments compensation, which was the most discussed and most controversial part of our work. But then also, I think there's a general critique that, you know, of the 115 recommendations, it kind of chose or selected some of the more, I guess you could say, the low-hanging fruit within those recommendations. And so, you know, there's strategic, reasons for doing that. But I think that's from, you know, what I'm hearing from the community is the general critique.
Well, the most obvious is that it's an election year and people want to get elected. I will say that out loud if you are not comfortable saying that out loud, but we did I think experience some pullback for legislators, honestly, around career. And I will say this, that's not our concern, right? Whether or not you are reelected, but I believe that all constituencies deserve to be served by government, and that includes us. You know what I mean? I did a little bit of research. We all did a little bit of research on the different groupings, and I wanted to get into each of them, specifically the education one. It was AB, I think, 1929 with McKenna, and she was one of the only legislators I saw that actually had the words descendant, regardless of where or how it was mentioned in the legislation. She actually included that in her expansion of access to career in technical education by creating a competitive grant. This particular grant is tied to descendant folks who want to do STEM education and continuing ed programs in high school and college. The bill, all of the bills kind of have short text at this stage, and I guess that is just a function of getting them up on the websites. But this particular bill is tied to the California Career Technical Education Incentive Grant Program that is currently housed under California Department of Education, and is tied to workforce. And even though that's great, and again, one of the only few bills that I saw with the term descendant, it put us back into worker class as opposed to owner business class. So I'm just curious if you have any thoughts about that. I know chapter 6 and 23 in the final report addressed education, and I probably only know that because I read that chapter 23 live as a volunteer, but I'm wondering how you think that that bill stacks up to the recommendations in chapters 6 and 23.
It's a really great question. So thank you for also raising that. I think to your point, I do think AB 929, which is Assemblymember Tina McKinner's bill, should be applauded because, like I said, to your point, of the 14 bills within the CLBC's reparations priority bill package, that was one, I think, of two bills that were narrowly tailored to descendants. The other one was Resolution ACR 135 that was introduced by Keila Weber, Assemblymember Weber, and Assemblymember Reggie Jones-Sawyer, that would provide an apology on behalf of the state of California to freed African slaves and their descendants. And so, yeah, to your point, I do think that AB 1929 should be applauded because it provides, grants to descendants of slaves who are interested in STEM related fields. I understand also the critique around, it still doesn't kind of get to, a form of reparations in the area of restitution that gets us to ownership, but it might, because, if you think of the long term of, STEM, grants going into STEM related programs, we can just practically think, okay, maybe that'll, assist more Black Americans in creating startups or something like that. But I think to your point, to address the ownership aspect of kind of where we want to see ourselves in the near and, future, I think, Senate Bill 490, SB 490, the creation of that new state agency, that is going to be critical to kind of transition us from kind of where we are positioned.
Thank you for that. I put I saw you, thank you. You put McCarty's bill, which you found a number for. When I was doing the initial research, I did not find
it doesn't
the
say
bill number. Yeah, look, when I looked at the bulk of the bills, so my responsibility was education, business, and health. And it was interesting to me that the bulk of the bills actually are not descendant specific. And I was, if I'm being honest, I was a little surprised by that. When I looked at McCarty did this, it looks like his revamped AB 25. That was the bill I found. So I haven't even looked at the bill number that you shared, which was AB 3131, a technical education bill. I'm not sure what is in that. But what his AB 25 bill was, it was basically student grants, and it was tied to income. And I found that, McCarty's bill was tied to income. The health bill by Bonta, AB 1975, was tied to income and Medi-Cal. Smallwood Cuevas, SB 1089, is tied to income. And so if everything is sort of being tied to income as an introduction, can we really even call it reparations?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, on the whole, there are going to be people who say probably not. Um, but at the same time, these were part of the recommendations of the task force. As if folks closely kind of followed the task force, there was a push, aka from me, to try to better organize these recommendations so that we could better signal to the state legislature, what are we really calling reparations and what are we just calling like good policy, that, the task force kind of like, kind of just performed over and beyond, I guess you could say. And so that was, if folks again followed the task force closely, like one of the major points of contention at our second to last hearing, May 8th, 2023, where you had folks from the community calling, you had me and other folks, a few folks on the task force, like member Monica Montgomery Stepp and even Vice Chair Amos Brown, pushing back and trying to, get better clarity in that final report to say, look, again, these are what we're calling reparations, which are the cash payments, the recommendations that are nearly tailored to descendants, and everything else is just, good policy that we're also including in here.
Do you think the legislature is running a risk by, Bradford used the term, if you load up the Christmas tree, the tree will fall down. Last I checked, you put the gifts under the tree. So I don't know why anybody's tree is falling down. But do you think that there is a risk, to the work that was done by the task force by not maybe being aggressive immediately after the recommendations came out?
I mean, possibly. I mean, we're already kind of seeing that. I mean, I'm just going to be frank. 2024 is the year of truth, so they say, right? Shout out to Cat Williams. I mean, public education has been a challenge. And in the 7 months, as Senator Bradford said, it's been a challenge where, even members of the state legislature can't be sure to know if they've actually even read the executive summary, which partly was released actually in 2022. And so, communications, public education, again, on the task force was constantly raising that as an issue, constantly, raising my concerns about, essentially how I saw it as, certain task force members who had the responsibility to come up with a coherent communications plan that involved hiring competent firms and individuals, and how that just wasn't the case. And now we're really seeing the kind of aftermath of it where, we can try to place some blame on the CLBC for, not introducing a cash payments bill. But honestly, the task force also needs to have some responsibility in that as well, because it was our job to, inform the public during the task force and afterwards. I know there were contracts for those responsibilities. And so, obviously some things haven't been done during the task force and afterwards. And so, now it's going to be up to, as we see, as Bradford mentioned, community groups and allies coming together to educate the public, but particularly the legislators, as to why this is important. And then, that also includes, hopefully, a long-term campaign to also implement cash payments.
Okay, and I want to ask you about the criminal justice reform aspects of the 2024 legislative package. Something that caught my eye was the bill put forth by member Joan Sawyer, a fun, community-driven solution to decrease community violence at family, school, and neighborhood levels in African-American communities, establishing a state-funded grant program. How do you think something like that would apply in real life? Like, what exactly would be the aspects of that? It seems kind of vague to me. I'm really not sure how that would, be established. What
I
that would
think
look
that's
like.
I think that's a good question. And I have kind of similar questions as well, that I think, to Senator Bradford's point, we won't really know until these, committee hearings. And then, hopefully, when there's a critical mass, there could be an influence of how these bills are amended or how they're finalized. through engaging in these hearings. But on its face, when I was reading that legislation, to me, it signaled that, you know, the state would be providing grants to nonprofits, community organizations, maybe churches, other entities, to you know, decrease forms of violence. And in the bill, they kind of indicate, you know, the different forms of violence they're talking about, that they say in the bill, you know, disproportionately impact African American communities. And so we'll see. A lot of these bills, when you read them, they're very vague. But again, I think the committee hearings is where hopefully we see more meat and more clarity.
All right, and I was also wondering about, you know, the overrepresentation of Black people that are incarcerated in California. California history with carceral logics is pretty insane, given the fact that Black people represent only 6% of the population, well over 20% of those that are in prison. And I was wondering about what are some of the solutions that would be brought up about this, and I saw nothing about it when I was looking through it. Uh, yeah, I was kind of taken aback by that.
Yeah. To
The
your point.
only Gibson, he's done some things on incarceration in general. Mike Gibson, he's done some work prior to the task force, and one of his pieces was under the business component, where he is expanding his AB 2138, prioritizing African Americans seeking occupational licenses. Particularly, he's another one who does have descendants in his bill. So that's one place where we see like the criminal justice system kind of lining up with state licenses, I think. But again, he and who's the first person I talked about? McKenna. Those are like the only two that I saw in the group that I researched that talked about descendants specific, and he's building on criminal justice work that he has already foundationally laid, because folks get out, they can be a barber in the prison system for the state, earning pennies on the dollar, and get out and potentially can't retain a barber license because they committed a felony. So that's one of the few places I know that we saw. And we know Mike Gibson, like Senator Bradford, is a friend to reparations and reparations legislation. But overall, for me, it was lackluster overall. That's just my, two cents.
You say they could be a barber and they can't come out to be a barber in society, but they also have them putting out wildfires, you know, crazy stuff like that. And then you look at the recidivism rates, 3 strikes. I didn't see any of these things being addressed. Um, I don't know.
Yeah, just to quickly add to that, I think there was even a story out that Governor Newsom recently, you know, sent, you know, some law enforcement to Oakland to fight crime, or how he's increasing funding to state prisons and policing, which, you know, in my opinion, is completely counterintuitive to, you know, signing the bill to create the task force and the commitment that kind of implied. And so I think, to Senator Bradford's point, there needs to be more public education that ends up resulting in a shifting of state priorities, where a shifting in the framework of governmental priorities, where the first instinct is not to reserve state money to, you know, mass incarceration and over policing, but to, you know, commit funding and resources to directly to our communities and to policies that we know are going to prevent those types of things from occurring.
Thank you. And I'd just like to say thank you for all your hard work that you did as the chair, AB 3121, championing our people and not letting our justice claim be co-opted. And, you know, we're all very grateful for you to have you in that position that you were able to champion us like that. So thank you for that. And my question is, how do you plan to continue advocating for reparations in California and maybe also federally? And what steps do you believe are necessary to ensure that bills like SB 490 gain widespread support and engagement?
That's a good question. So, I'll just continue. I'm continuing to do what I did while I was on the task force, engaging in interviews like this, meeting with different groups. And yeah, just continue to spread the word about not only now, the work of the task force, but, the fact that we have actual reparations legislation in the state capital, at least the ones where we know that are nearly tailored to descendants. And to be honest, I want all of, Senator Bradford's bills to be passed. I want all of the CLBC's bills to be passed, even if they seem to be lackluster in this first iteration, because, it's all going to lead to, ultimate progress. It's going to just lead to, a place in a space where we're going to see full and effective reparations, including cash payments, not only in the state of California, but, federally as well.
And I have a question for you around the governor. During the AB 3121 hearings, I forget her name, but there was someone who came and talked about a bill sponsored by Dr. Weber. And we know the junior, Weber Jr., has now put forth a similar piece of legislation that her mother initially sponsored when she was in the assembly, and how this bill for funding of the most underperforming students made its way all the way through the state legislature, all the way up to the governor's desk. And the governor, by a sleight of hand, changed the language from the most underperforming students to the poorest school districts. And that took what should have been 84,000 Black students being serviced, that took that number down to about 5,000, 6,000 Black students being serviced. And I am just a little concerned because we're seeing all of these other bills that are tied to equity by way of income. And I am nervous that our governor, who may give us an apology, right, which is one of the things that one of the 5 pillars of reparations, and it qualifies, the apology qualifies. But do you have any concern that the governor could potentially take legislation and change the language, or some of the non-descendant policy in particular could be challenged in court?
Yeah, I'd see more the latter, which I think I won't get to that, but I think to your point, I think I see more of the latter where I think the descendant-based language is good, it's safe, and that advocates should work with legislators to build upon and to increase, those types of bills. The other bills that are not like nearly tailored to descendants, I think to your point, actually might get some challenge. We're already seeing that, like ACA 7, which was introduced by elected official Gibson, Assemblymember Gibson. It's already getting some challenge from, how would you say it? People from, the people who challenge affirmative action in the Supreme Court, like if
conservatives.
Conservatives, I guess you could say, are already starting to challenge ACA 7 and tying it to, the reparations task force. I think I saw like a conservative news outlet, of the 14 bills, discuss the one in particular about racially based eminent domain, which I believe is one of Senator Bradford's bills that's co-sponsored by Senator Lois Smallwood-Cuevas. And, they were kind of critiquing that language, saying that, it may be unconstitutional. So we'll see. But at the end of the day, I do think, again, the community and lineage-based reparations advocates just need to stay engaged and work with the legislators to educate them, because obviously that's woefully missing per Bradford's comments, and then, build out these bills.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, and we appreciate you being here, a part of our Black Civics Collective, and everybody who tuned in and our viewership today. We all appreciate you being a part of the collective, and please make sure you all tune in and don't miss our next episode, airing March 11th. That's 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and also don't forget to check out our swag shop. Everything that you purchase, of course, goes to our grassroots advocacy and us pushing this federal reparations forward for our people. And
we want to remind everyone just one more time to take our survey. It is very important that we get everyone who's watching this show, everyone who's going to watch the next show, take that survey, share it with your friends, share it at your church, share it at your schools. Please, please, please take the survey and share it. Thank you.
All right. I think that's going to wrap us. We did not give Camila the opportunity to give her social media handle. But again, I follow most people on Twitter. That is just my social media of choice. And so if you want to stay involved with former Chair Camila Moore of the AB 3121 Task Force, you can follow her at Camila, Kamilah V Moore, Moore. And stay engaged, because she does continuously post about what is happening in California and how you can stay involved. We thank you so much for tuning in to our second episode, and we have some really, really amazing guests, stacked up guest hosts. Guests, we have some really amazing guests that we are going to bring into this conversation. We're going to push to get our show up to twice a month. So stay with us. Follow us on social media at NAASDORG, whether it's TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you name it. We are there, and we will see you next time. Thanks so much, folks.
Thanks for tuning in and being part of our Black Civics Collective. Peace. Reparations.
Peace and reparations.